this movie is really about the concepts of databases and database management systems and the idea of relational databases. So first of all, the databases are used by many different organizations to manage data. So a database is just an organized collection of integrated and related tables. That's an electronic database, but if you think about your life, you have used a lot of databases. If anybody has ever used a phone book, then you've used a database. If you think about the white pages in a phone book versus the yellow pages, the white pages is organized by everybody's last name, first name, and it gives last name, first name, address, phone number, right? And so if you wanted to find Mandel H. Helen address, you'd open up the white pages and find the name, and then that, at least at one point in time, was my address, right? And phone number. If you wanted to use a yellow page, those are organized by business type, right? So let's say you needed a plumber. So you could turn to the P's and look for plumbers, and then within all the plumbers, they would be like A1 plumbing, B2 plumbing, Castman plumbing. It'd be in alphabetic order, okay? So same type of data, be a business name, a business address, a phone number, but organized differently, right? And let's say the company went out of business, the company's office changed, their phone number changed, the person's name changed. So all of that printed material in the phone book is outdated, right? It's only as good as that snapshot in time when it was printed. That's one of the advantages of an electronic database, is the editing, updating, adding, deleting of information is easier and real time. So a database management system is the software that allows you to create a database, manage the data, sort and retrieve the data, create queries, do all of that sort of work. That's what the DBMS does. So what you want to understand is that the DBMS, is the umbrella that holds the database and has the techniques for maintaining that database. So using a database management system, people can build applications to do all sorts of things. Track orders, delivery, you do something from Amazon, you want to do your tracking. That's all manipulation of data that's organized. That's a database. So organized data access is what's known as a relational database. And what that means is that data is organized into a collection of related tables, the object called table. And each table stores data about one group of information. So that's one of the big things when you're learning how to use a database, is being able to focus that table on one category, if you will. So if you had people's demographics, employee demographics would be in a table, but their schedule or maybe their tax information or their payroll, that would be in a separate table because it's tracking different things, right? So organizing data in a related manner is the function of a relational database. So within a database, there is a hierarchy of structure. So the lowest piece of information is called a field. And you want to define a field as the lowest or the smallest meaningful piece of information. So if you take a look at somebody's name, that's really 3 pieces of information: first name, middle initial or middle name, last name. Then you might even have one that would be junior, the third, it could be more. But at the core, there'd be 3 fields because last name has meaning, first name has meaning. And when you separate that data out, you're able then it's so much easier to bring data together than to pull it apart. So a field is the smallest meaningful piece of data. Records are a collection of those related fields. A table is a collection of all of the records, and then a database is a collection of all of the tables. So let's take a look at that. So field, single unit of data. And the examples are date enrolled, student first name, student last name, student ID. A record then for all of this information about one student, one person, one entity. Okay, so if you think, if you looked at all of this, although these don't necessarily all go together in a single table, but and then a table would be for each record of each student, you would have a table that would hold all your students. So a table is a collection of related records. A record is a collection of related fields. And then a database is all of the tables together. So if we take a look at this, how Access organizes this is through objects. Access is an object-oriented database management system. So the Access interface is how you interact with Access to create, modify, delete, and use different objects, right? So the ribbon in Access has 5 primary tabs: File, Home, Create, External Data, and Database Tools. And then it has contextual tabs. But what you need to know about is, first of all, understanding what these objects are. So data, somebody's first name, that is stored in a table. A table is the only place that data is stored. So the purpose of a table is to store data. A query is something that poses another keyword, a question about the data. So a query is a way to question data that's stored in a table and get a result set or an answer. So let's say I have a table that has all of my student information, demographics, and I want to know all of the students who, let's say, date of birth less than a certain date, or date of birth over a certain date. Maybe we can give a senior discount or something. So I pose a question and say, hey, show me all of the students whose date of birth is less than, 1955, January 1st, 1955. And so it would pose that question to the data in the table, and then the answer would be displayed. And here would be your list. In the query object, the only thing saved is the question, right? Because every time you run that question, it's going to go out to the table and get possibly a different answer because this data may be updated. A form is an object that really creates an interface for you. So it is a way to create a screen that organizes your data in a meaningful way. So if you have an input form that you type data into, it would be really nice if your screen matched that form that you're typing from, right? And then you don't have to jump all over. The process of organizing that screen is a form. And then the last main object that we're going to talk about is a report. And a report is a way to organize data in a meaningful way and oftentimes give some kind of statistical subtotals, grand totals, averages. It can be printed to a screen, it can be printed to a file, it can be printed to a printer. So those are the 4 main objects that manipulate or look at data in a system. They all have their own role. All right, so in Access, you have, this is the navigation pane, and it allows you to display by groups, object type, which is kind of the default. You'd see all your tables together, all your queries together, all your reports. But you can do it in different ways. The other big thing I want to talk about is the difference between a table and, data sheet and design view, right? So data sheet view is where you see the data. Design view, so data sheet view, you actually see the data. Design view lets you manipulate the underlying object and design it, right? Okay, so in Access, object names, 64 characters. So that's your table names, right? Letters, numbers, and spaces. I do not recommend you space, guys. Down the road, it's going to cause you problems. Put everything together. Can include special characters except these, right? Period, exclamation, bracket, and apostrophe, because those all have special meanings, and the name cannot begin with a space. The next thing I want to look at is data types. So your data can be made up of different things, right? So short text, long text, those are two ways of holding alphanumeric or data that is not going to be used in any kind of calculation. Short text is what's known as a fixed length. So if I say that field is a short text, let's say last name, and I'm saying it's 35 characters, that's all it can be. And every field that has last name is 35, whether your name takes it or not, right? It's fixed in its length. Long text is what's known as a variable length field, and it's really good for things like comments and notes because it changes its size based on what's used in it. Then the other big category is number, and so number is numeric, has a numeric value. So if you had a number line across your room, it would have a place on that number line. You can do calculations on it. Within a number, so the category, the data type is number, but within that number you can format it to have decimals or not decimals. And then date time is another big one, and that's just what it is. You can set up a date or a time. And then there's other ones, and we'll get to them as we move through the system. Okay, so I have really one more thing that I want to talk about, and that is a primary key. All right, so a primary key is super important. And what that means is it's one or more fields. It can be multiple fields, but for every record, right? So for every student, for every business name, content, for every enrollment, for every payment rec, there has to be something in that record that makes it unique. And it can be a single field. For example, for a student at Stark State College, it would be your S number, right? That S number is not shared by anybody. That is uniquely yours. So if I've typed in your S number, I'm only going to ever get to you. Or it could be a combination. And so we'll look at that. But start thinking about what could be a primary key. And let's say you have data that there's nothing there that's unique. Then you can use a field that is a data type called auto number. And an auto number is a numeric field that's an integer, meaning it's a whole number, and it just counts up 1, 2, 3, 4. It just picks the next number, and it makes that unique. So let's say I have 10 records in. I realize I didn't need record number 5. I go and I delete record 5. So let's say customer ID 5 or rec number 5 is no longer needed. 5 is never used again. It's gone. It's never to be used in the system. So the number that's generated is for that record, that row only. Okay, I think I'm pretty much at a good stopping point. I really just wanted to introduce you to some terms and some concepts. We're going to pick up on Pause and Practice 2, because Pause and Practice 1 is really just going through a system. I really want you to go through it, but I don't need to have a movie to have you read and go through it. We'll start with Access Chapter 1, Pause and Practice 2.